We've all heard of that moment in the 16th century when humanity's understanding of the universe shifted from believing that the Earth was the center of all planetary motion to realizing instead that the sun was actually the center of the solar system. For centuries prior, it had been a widely accepted truth that all of the universe's planets and stars rotated around the Earth, the Ptolemaic model, and that we as a result were the center of everything. But all that changed as the world began to accept Nicholas Copernicus's proposal that we and the other planets were actually rotating around the sun. Now, it's easy for us to laugh at the charming naivete of that earlier view, given everything we now know. But imagine, if you will, what it must have felt like to be present for that moment of change. That moment when your entire perception of the solar system, of the universe and your place in it, of reality, shifted. You and the rest of mankind were no longer the center of everything. The universe no longer rotated around us. After centuries of absolute conviction, supported by the world's leading scientists, it turns out that we and several other planets were actually rotating around a star, and there are many more of them visible in the heavens above. Interestingly, all of your sensory observations and data would remain exactly the same as they had been prior to this shift. The planets would still move across the sky exactly as they had before, and those planets would still appear in the exact same relative positions. But suddenly, you would be seeing that reality from a completely different perspective. That is what Thomas Kuhn, the 20th century physicist, historian, and philosopher of science, called a paradigm shift. In his groundbreaking book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Kuhn introduced the idea of paradigms as a series of broadly accepted ways of thinking about the universe and its data, which repeatedly changed in what are called paradigm shifts, such as the Copernican revolution that we just discussed. Today, you most often hear the term paradigm shift used in reference to the kind of radical disruptive change that is causing such upheaval in so many of today's industries and businesses, such as Uber is a real paradigm shift in how we think about taxi services. Or sometimes you hear paradigm shift used as a stand-in for out-of-the-box thinking, as in, Bob, we need a real paradigm shift here. But I believe that properly understood, paradigm shift is an idea of such import that it's actually one of the keys to modern business and even personal success, but not for the reasons that most people think. The real power behind Kuhn's idea of a paradigm shift is not just that it represents some radical change from the status quo or some completely new disruptive idea. The real power of Kuhn's idea of a paradigm shift is that it represents a radical shift in perspective, a radical shift in the way we see the world, and that each shift can and will be followed by yet another. Kuhn illustrated this point with the example of Copernicus's paradigm shift, as well as those led by Galileo, Newton, Einstein, and many others. But what made Kuhn such a giant in the history and philosophy of science was his reminder that even our current system of science and understanding is subject to these radical shifts in perspective. Yet somehow we always believe that we now have it right, that we now know the truth. But as Kuhn illustrates through these scientific paradigms, time and time again, we are every bit as certain in our beliefs as those who believed in an Earth-centered view of the universe were in theirs. And look what happened to them. What happened is that everything changed. They may not have even ever thought it was possible, and all the observable data may have remained exactly the same, but everything they understood about it changed. And that is the true power inherent in Kuhn's idea of a paradigm shift. Kuhn establishes the idea that what we once considered to be objectively true in the world of science, the most objective of all fields of study, may in fact simply be a subjective construct that we imposed upon our observations, a lens, if you will, through which we see the world, and that perspective can and will and probably should at some point change. Interestingly, until Kepler, almost 70 years later, Copernicus' system was no more accurate in its planetary predictions than Ptolemy's. So literally all that had changed was the perspective or paradigm through which the world was viewing that same set of data. But that paradigm shift enabled several important new ideas that would not have been possible without it. That the other planets had more in common with the Earth than had previously been understood, that Venus should display phases, and that the universe as a whole is much larger than anyone had previously heretofore supposed. When, decades after Copernicus' death, a telescope showed the contours of the moon, the phases of Venus, and a myriad of undiscovered stars, even the final holdouts began to convert to this new paradigm. So if this kind of subjective lens is in place in the objective world of scientific study, Imagine how many lenses we must have in our modern lives. And imagine what could be possible if we could try on new lenses. Because as uncomfortable as it may be, what Kuhn's idea suggests is that none of us has a privileged perspective, and that inevitably there can and will be other equally valid or even superior perspectives to better help us understand and explain the world around us. What it also suggests is that maybe rather than thinking of understanding as some objective view of reality that we finally arrive at, maybe it is best thought of as the sum total of all the possible perspectives through which a given set of data may be interpreted. Maybe there are helpful aspects of insight in every perspective. And maybe there is simply power in the realization that there are many more possible perspectives than we may be aware of at any given point in time. I've always found this a very powerful enabler of creative thinking, a way to open one's mind to new ideas and solutions by questioning and examining unacknowledged assumptions. But when one applies this thinking to the dynamic rate of change in modern business, one may obviously conclude that the lesson is cling too long to your existing paradigm and the world may change under your feet. Think Blockbuster or Borders, who couldn't make the shift to new forms and new ways of purchasing and consuming media. Or on the flip side, identify new paradigms and opportunities abound. Think Netflix or Amazon, who built their entire business model on these new ways of purchasing and consuming media. While true, I actually believe there's some even more interesting implications of this idea, such as the real business reason for a diverse and inclusive workforce. Besides the obvious moral imperatives of equality and fairness, an organization with a diverse and inclusive workforce will inherently have a more diverse set of viewpoints, perspectives, and ideas. And that organization will be better positioned to identify and make the kind of paradigm shifts required for sustained success. Now, when I say inclusive, I mean inclusive in all possible senses, because I literally experience every day how powerful and valuable a diverse set of perspectives can be. As the CEO of VSA Partners, I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with some of the world's leading companies, and in particular, several of the world's leading technology companies. And as you can imagine, these companies are sitting on tons of data and employ armies of the world's best and brightest to analyze and interpret it for them. So I believe that the real reason that they find value in engaging companies like mine is our ability to help them see that information and their opportunities in fresh new ways, and to help them implement those paradigm shifts both internally and externally. As a result, I've really come to appreciate the power of these kinds of paradigm shifts because I've seen firsthand the value that they create for companies. But there is another application of this idea that's related to a particular shift going on right now in how modern businesses are going to market. In the rapidly changing environment that we now find ourselves in, including the accelerated pace of technological change and the emergence of alternate business models, more and more enterprises are being forced to move beyond traditional business and marketing approaches to instead focus on creating a total customer experience, or CX as it's known, that differentiates from competitors. Customer experience is an approach to creating business value that's considered by many to be one of the most powerful drivers of new customer acquisition and retention. And it is currently the bleeding edge of branding and marketing as practiced by the world's leading enterprises. It is based on discarding many of the traditional approaches to branding and marketing, and instead focus unrelentingly on creating a customer experience, the entirety of the customer experience, so that it creates maximum value for the customer and strategic differentiation from competitors. So instead of continually asking, what else can we sell people, or how can we get people to engage with our programs or messages, businesses are forced to understand the experience from the perspective of their customers and envision opportunities to make every aspect of that experience more enjoyable, more valuable, and more memorable. Think of the way Dollar Shave Club made buying razors and blades so effortless, fun, and inexpensive with their direct-to-consumer, mail-order subscription model. They didn't out-advertise Gillette or Schick, or simply make better brand promises. They created a total customer experience that was so delightful, from the ordering experience to the packaging the product arrived in, that people tried it, stayed with it, and told their friends about it. Dollar Shave Club now has a 50% share of the online razor market, is growing its subscribers at a rate of 10% a year, and was purchased by Unilever for $1 billion. Not surprisingly, creating this kind of total customer experience requires business leaders to abandon their traditional obsession with profits and shareholder value, and instead focus unrelentingly and unwaveringly on creating real value for real customers in every aspect of their experience with a company and its products. By doing that, they will in turn create the profits and value they aspire to. In short, it's a real paradigm shift for business leaders, because they have to view a set of data from a completely different perspective. And it is very difficult to do. Every bit as difficult as it was for a society raised believing that the Earth was the center of the solar system to begin interpreting information based on the sun being at the center. These business leaders are forced to truly understand what their customers experience from a multitude of perspectives as diverse as their customer base. Because even the most narrowly focused of brands and businesses have a tremendous diversity in the points of view, needs, desires, and values of their customers. And they need to abandon this view of looking at things through the lens of their company's annual plans or quarterly goals, and instead see things from the perspective of each customer's mission in order to create a completely frictionless experience where nothing hinders them on their path to a fulfilling and memorable outcome. And they need to realize that the best way for a company to achieve its goals is for it to help real people achieve theirs. Because when a customer experience is that well designed and managed, people reward that company with their business, their loyalty, and their advocacy because they want to. Now, as you can imagine, making this kind of shift is an enormous challenge for companies, and even those that can and do are then forced to confront the challenge of managing every aspect of every interaction with their brands and businesses to cater to this broad swath of humanity. That includes managing interactions with the product itself, the retail environment, the sales associates, the packaging design, the digital marketing, the marketing materials, customer service, and so on and so on. This means that even those companies that are able to achieve the paradigm shift of truly seeing the business through the lens of their customer's experience often struggle to act on that information. And this is not just because of the complexity of the task. I believe it is often because the diverse set of internal experts within the organization, each of whom create key aspects of the customer experience, often have difficulty communicating, collaborating, and coordinating because they struggle to understand each other's paradigms. This is yet another application of Kuhn's idea and another required paradigm shift. In order to truly deliver experiences that are more compelling and coherent for customers, businesses are forced to confront the unique perspectives of a diverse set of internal experts, from product designers and data scientists, retail marketers and merchandising managers, social media managers, e-commerce experts, packaging designers, and so on and so on, each of whom see the world from their own unique vantage point. Think of them as scores of Ptolemies and Copernicuses, each envisioning a different body at the center of the business solar system. For the data science team, for example, customer experience is seen as quantifiable correlations between causes and effects that can be modeled, predicted, and optimized. With each aspect, a new opportunity to capture more data, test more correlations, and implement more optimized recommendations. For the retail marketing team, customer experience is understood as the activities in and around the actual point of transaction, with every component judged based on its ability to help or hinder an immediate sale of the largest size possible, and so on and so on. Interestingly, the kind of paradigm shift that needs to happen to create these optimal customer experience comes straight out of Kuhn's writings, namely, realizing that no individual team has a privileged perspective on the truth, and that by understanding how others can view the same set of data from a completely different perspective is one of the keys to successful collaboration. As a result, organizations need leaders who are not only able to make the shift to seeing the business through the lens of the customer's experience, they need leaders who understand the paradigms that each of these diverse set of internal experts brings to optimizing that experience, can identify opportunities for each paradigm to enhance the others, and can communicate those opportunities to these diverse group of experts through a paradigm they understand. For example, helping sales teams understand how predictive models might be able to curate social media posts to create a more satisfying retail experience. These leaders play the role of Copernicus in their organizations by helping all within it to shift their perspective to a system centered on the customer experience versus the business or its parts. But it's not until these individual experts discover the opportunities in their area and others that the real paradigm shift takes place. Think of it as the moment when the telescope showed everyone what Copernicus had known all along. Or as Kuhn so elegantly put it, before they can hope to communicate fully, one group or the other must experience the conversion that we have been calling a paradigm shift. While Kuhn's ideas were focused on the world of science, he demonstrated some powerful insights with implications for the world of business as well as all forms of interpersonal communication. Namely, the practical power of realizing that the same set of data can be understood in a multitude of ways, and realizing that real perspective shifts can be powerful, world-changing tools. Think about how this could change the current climate of social or political discourse when we understand that our seemingly objective paradigms can and do shift. Instead of groups talking past each other, endlessly repeating the same refrain from their respective paradigms, some would realize that the most effective way to find common ground or even sway perspectives is to understand the other's paradigm well enough to frame an argument within it. Or think about how many new constructive personal and business relationships could be possible if we abandon the view that we have the one and only true perspective and instead look for insights in the perspectives of others. These kind of perspective shifts do, however, require three things: an openness to considering and respecting others' perspectives, acknowledging that none of us alone can corner the market on truth, and realizing that incorporating a diversity of thought is not just the right thing to do ethically, but the best thing to do practically, both in our business and personal lives. Because real insight comes from truly understanding the full diversity of others' points of view. Through these paradigm shifts, businesses and individuals can and do change for the better. As Kuhn noted, led by a new paradigm, scientists adopt new instruments and look in new places. Even more important, during revolutions, scientists see new and different things when looking with familiar instruments in places they have looked before. I can think of no better definition of success for both the modern enterprise and the enlightened individual. So the question I'd like to leave you with is, with a shift in paradigm, what new and different things do you think you will see when you look in the places you have looked before? I wish you all the opportunity to find out. Thank you.